The first job I ever took once I finished graduate school was to work at a church, a local church, a struggling local church. It was a lot different from the church that you're currently sitting in, a lot fewer people, and a lot more traditional. I think they hired me on to infuse some youthful energy, so that's what I came to do. So imagine, here I am as a graduate with diploma in hand, certifying that I have a master's degree in divinity. I had read thousands of pages about God and church. I had written hundreds of pages and papers about how to deliver effective sermons, about how to take a good church's great, how to pray and all of that stuff. So here I am walking into my first meeting with this attitude of, oh boy, I'm gonna show them how smart and how wise I am. I'm gonna demonstrate all of that. I'm gonna turn this church around. You can imagine how that story ends, can't you? My first couple months in, everything I do, I fail. Every program that I started, I failed. Every sermon that I preached fell flat. Every group and class that I led, few, if anybody, showed up. I was a fool. In fact, I'm bumming out about all of this, asking, what's going on? Why aren't people listening to me? How come I don't have any influence with this church? And I share this with a friend of mine, and he says, Chris, and he says it in his southern drawl, only he can do it, but he says, Chris, he looks at me and says, you gone to fool. You gone to school, but you still a fool. You gone to school, but you still a fool. We all know people like that, don't we? People like me. People who may run their mouths. People who think they know everything, but at the end of the day, they don't. They really actually know very little. I was a fool. Now think about it. Who's the most foolish person that you know? Who's the most foolish person that you know? He's the person or she's the person that runs their mouth, and they may even know a lot, but again, at the end of the day, they a fool. They a fool. Who are the Homer Simpsons in your world, right? Who are the dumb and dumber in your world? Who is the most foolish person that you know? And if you're elbowing that person next to you, that's not helpful. Don't do that, all right? Now, let me ask the other question. Who's the wisest person that you know? When you think of wisdom, this is the person that comes to mind. Is it someone who is incredibly intelligent? Is it someone who's incredibly brilliant? Someone successful? Someone experienced? Who is the most wise person that you know? When you have life's deepest issues, who do you go to? Who is your Yoda? Who is your Yoda? Should I marry this girl? Should I take this job? Marry her, you should. Who is your Yoda? Who's the wisest person that you know? You see, we all have assumptions about wisdom. For example, age. A lot of us commonly associate age with wisdom. That the older you get, the more experiences that you have, the wider your hair becomes, that you are actually getting wiser. And for most of the time, that's actually true. But I know you probably know a lot of people. I know a lot of people, younger people, who I would say are wise beyond their years. So age doesn't always mean wisdom. What about education? A lot of us commonly associate wisdom with education. The smarter you are, the more intelligent you are, the more a person has gone to school, the more degrees that they have, the wiser they are. Sure, they're smart, but I know a lot of you know a ton of really smart people who are still dumb as heck. Educated, but still a fool. You know what I'm saying? And then there's success. We commonly associate wisdom with success. Successful people are wise. Maybe. But a lot of times successful people are just lucky, being in the right place at the right time. In fact, there's probably a lot of successful people who are foolish, and because of their foolishness are no longer successful. I bet you know a lot of people like that. Success doesn't always equal wisdom. There's all these assumptions that we make about wisdom, how you get it, who has it, how you get more of it. But in Proverbs, Solomon says something very unique about wisdom. He highlights one characteristic that is consistent, that is common among all wise people. All wise people have this one thing. And he helps us realize that if we did everything that we could to get this thing, it would actually make us wiser. You know what it is? It's this. The wise store up knowledge, but the mouth of a fool invites ruin. Let me say that again. The wise store up knowledge, but the mouth of a fool invites ruin. The wise store it up. They listen. They take in. They store up knowledge, experiences, information. They have an open-handed, open-minded posture with life. And so they're constantly listening, constantly learning, constantly being exposed to new ideas and new thoughts. Even if they may not agree with it, they're storing up knowledge. They take it in. That's what wise people do. The fool, on the other hand, invites ruin with their mouth because they're all about not taking in, but letting out. For the fool, it's not about what's going in, it's about what's coming out. They're so busy focusing on what they know or what they think they know, they don't stop to listen. They don't stop to learn. And so in fact, it invites ruin. They are the perpetual Mr. or Mrs. Know-it-all. That's the challenge with fools. The wisest people I know are people who do more listening than they do talking. Why? Because the wisest people I know realize that they don't know it all. Wise people acknowledge they need more knowledge. Wise people acknowledge they need more knowledge. And you see this happen in all different aspects of life. Whether it's in your public life or in your private life, wise people acknowledge that they need more knowledge. Whether it's in your public life, at your job, for me, I was such a fool because I came in there trying to demonstrate everything that I knew when it would have been such a wiser decision to come in there trying to store up knowledge. You know where I see this? I see this most frequently online or on social media or in the comments section on a certain site or some kind of online discussion. How much more helpful those conversations would be if people had a posture of storing up knowledge rather than trying to demonstrate how smart and wise they were. This happens in our private lives as well, whether it's with your family or at home or with your kids. My wife and I often have conversations, some deep, heartfelt conversations, and every time she shares with me a struggle or something that she's going through, you know what used to be the first thing that would come out of my mouth? I would used to say, honey, let me give you some advice. How do you think that went over? Horrible. I was a fool, right? I became a lot wiser when I started saying, honey, tell me more. Why do you feel that way? What's going on? Let me store up more knowledge so I can have a more wiser, informed decision. Acknowledging that we are not know-it-alls is a huge step towards wisdom. It's huge. Now, what do we do with all of that? Is there any practical applications to this? Yes, there is. Let me suggest to you one practical application that if all of us implemented consistently starting right now would make us wiser, guaranteed. You wanna know what it is? It's this. Be curious. Be curious. Because wise people aren't critical, they're curious. Wise people ask questions. They seek to understand and are quick to listen before speaking. They take in, they store up knowledge. They prioritize asking questions before giving answers. They're curious people. They adopt a posture of curiosity. And you know what's fascinating? Is that Jesus models this for us. Jesus the great, Jesus the wise, Jesus the Savior of the world, the original Mr. Know-it-all if there ever was, and in a good way, because he really did know it all. In the New Testament, Jesus was asked 183 questions. How many times does he give a direct response? 3. How many times does he ask a question of his own? 307. Think about that. Jesus asked 307 questions and only gave 3 direct responses. There is a lot of wisdom in being curious. As I think back to that first job I had, I realize now what I should have done. I should have come in with a posture of curiosity. I should have been curious. I should have realized that I didn't know it all. Instead, I thought I knew it all, when in reality I didn't, and I was a fool. I should have come in prioritizing curiosity, asking questions, listening before speaking. Because the wise acknowledge they need more knowledge. And that's good to know, whether you're in your 20s or your 30s or your 40s. That's great to remember, whether you're in your 50s, 60s, or 70s. It doesn't matter how old you are, how much education you have, how much experience you have had in life. This is good to know. Because if we took this to heart, I think it could transform the kind of conversations that we're involved in, the discussions and the relationships that we have, that you have in your family, that you have in your community, the influence that we could have with people in all parts of our life. If we prioritize this and did it consistently, it would be a game changer. It would make us all wiser, both you and me. And that is something that is really good to know.